What happens when a group of immigrants, fiercely devoted to their faith, arrives in a new land and finds their church drifting from its confessional roots? Do they adapt or break away to preserve what they believe is true? This is the story of the 1857 split between the Christian Reformed Church, CRC, and the Reformed Church in America, RCA, a division that still echoes across time. What began as a theological disagreement became a cultural, educational, and spiritual turning point that shaped generations of Dutch American Christians. It's not just a tale of churches, but of people wrestling with how to remain faithful in a world constantly shifting beneath their feet. The split between the Christian Reformed Church and the Reformed Church in America in the mid-19th century is a profound moment in American religious history. Though it may appear at first glance to be a denominational dispute, it represents far more a collision of doctrine, identity, governance, culture, and immigrant experience. At its core, the schism was fueled by differing understandings of how the church should engage with modernity, how faithful it should remain to confessional standards, and how tightly it should cling to its cultural origins. The CRC-RCA divide captures the tension between assimilation and preservation, between reform and tradition, between theological fidelity and cultural accommodation. To understand the split, one must begin with the migration of Dutch Reformed Christians to America in the 19th century. In the Netherlands, the 1834 Afscheiding, secession, had already fractured the Dutch Reformed Church as groups dissatisfied with theological liberalism and state control broke away to preserve Reformed orthodoxy. Among these seceders were devout Calvinists who longed for religious freedom and doctrinal purity. Many of them looked to America as a land of opportunity, not only economically, but spiritually. Arriving in the 1840s and 1850s, these immigrants often joined the only Dutch Reformed body available, the Reformed Church in America, which had its roots in the Dutch colonial church of the 17th century. However, tensions quickly surfaced. These new arrivals found the RCA too lax in doctrine, too Americanized in worship, and too tolerant of modern trends. In particular, they objected to the use of revivalist hymns instead of psalms, to open communion practices, and to what they perceived as a lack of church discipline and doctrinal accountability. Moreover, cultural differences exacerbated the theological ones. The RCA had long since adapted to American life. Its ministers were trained in American seminaries, its services conducted in English, and its congregations shaped by the democratic ethos of the New World. The new immigrants, on the other hand, still spoke Dutch, cherished catechetical instruction, and resisted cultural assimilation. They were committed to the Heidelberg Catechism, the Belgic Confession, and the Canons of Dort, not merely as historical documents, but as living standards of faith and practice. They feared that in joining the RCA, they were being asked to sacrifice their theological integrity and distinct identity. By 1857, these tensions reached a breaking point. 4 churches, 2 in Michigan and 2 in Illinois, formally seceded from the RCA to form what would become the Christian Reformed Church. Their reasons were explicitly theological and cultural. They believed the RCA had strayed from Reformed orthodoxy, had failed to exercise proper church discipline, and had compromised with the spirit of the age. From the outset, the CRC positioned itself as a more confessional, disciplined, and culturally distinct body. Worship services were conducted in Dutch. Only psalms were sung. Communion was closely guarded. Ministers were expected to uphold the 3 forms of unity without reservation. The CRC was not just a church, it was a covenant community, a spiritual homeland for those who felt alienated by the broader currents of American Protestantism. The separation wasn't merely about worship style or language. It revealed 2 divergent visions of what it meant to be Reformed in America. The RCA saw itself as a bridge between its Dutch heritage and its American context, a church that could adapt without losing its soul. The CRC, however, feared that such adaptation would inevitably lead to doctrinal erosion and spiritual compromise. Education became one of the defining battle lines between the 2 groups. The CRC was deeply suspicious of public schools, seeing them as too secular, too Americanizing, and too detached from Reformed theology. In response, they established their own parochial school systems, where children would be taught from a Reformed worldview. This commitment to Christian education was not peripheral. It was central to the CRC's identity. It reflected their conviction that every sphere of life, including education, must be brought under the lordship of Christ. The RCA, by contrast, was more open to engaging with the broader culture, including public education. While still committed to Christian values, they believed that faith could thrive within the American system, rather than against it. This divergence in educational philosophy further cemented the split, creating two parallel communities with different assumptions about faith, culture, and mission. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the CRC remained insular and distinct. It maintained Dutch as the language of worship well into the 20th century. It developed its own theological institutions, most notably Calvin Theological Seminary and Calvin College, which became key centers of Reformed thought. It sent out missionaries, not just abroad, but into America itself, seeking to plant churches that preserved its confessional distinctiveness. Meanwhile, the RCA continued to diversify. It embraced English in worship earlier, opened itself to broader ecumenical movements, and became more integrated into the American mainline Protestant landscape. It remained committed to Reformed theology, but was less rigid in its application. It participated in national dialogues, joined interdenominational efforts, and became more visibly American in style and structure. Despite their differences, both churches grew, and yet the pain of the split lingered. Families were divided, communities fractured, theological polemics flew across denominational lines. Over time, some attempts were made at reconciliation, but deep differences persisted. The CRC came to be seen as the more conservative, confessional body, while the RCA was perceived as more moderate, inclusive, and ecumenical. In recent decades, both denominations have faced new challenges. The RCA has wrestled with issues of human sexuality, scriptural authority, and denominational identity, issues that have led to further splits and declining membership. The CRC, while maintaining confessional integrity, has also faced generational shifts, cultural pressures, and questions about how to engage a post-Christian society. Ironically, the very questions that led to the 1857 split, how to be faithful in a changing culture, how to preserve doctrine without isolating from the world, are just as pressing today. The CRC-RCA divide offers a sobering lesson about the costs of division, but also a reminder that theology matters, that culture shapes faith, and that ecclesial decisions have long-term consequences. One cannot help but admire the conviction of those early CRC founders. They sacrificed comfort, unity, and institutional support in order to stand for what they believed was true. Their actions may appear rigid to some, but they flowed from a deep love for the gospel and a desire to see the church remain faithful. At the same time, the RCA's willingness to engage, adapt, and minister in a diverse and changing society reflects a different kind of courage, the courage to risk cultural relevance while trying to stay grounded in Reformed identity. Neither path was easy. Both involved trade-offs, and both continue to shape the American Reformed tradition to this day. In many ways, the CRC-RCA story is a microcosm of broader trends in American Christianity. The tension between tradition and innovation, between confessionalism and contextualization, between separation and engagement. It reminds us that church history is not just about institutions or ideas. It's about people striving to be faithful in their time and place. For those interested in Reformed theology, immigrant church history, or the development of American Protestantism, the CRC-RCA split is essential reading. It provides insight into how doctrine and culture interact, how communities define themselves, and how the gospel is both preserved and proclaimed in changing times. As the American church faces new cultural shifts, the CRC-RCA division offers a mirror, a way to examine our own responses to pressure, pluralism, and polarization. Their story invites us to build bridges when possible, set boundaries when necessary, and always keep Christ at the center. If this story deepened your appreciation for the struggles and faith of those who came before us, and if you'd like more in-depth narratives from church history that inform your present and shape your faith, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Click that subscribe button, share this story, and join us as we continue exploring history that matters.